you help that all pass along, then your bathroom experience the next day is a little bit less cumbersome than without the fiber, or at least a little bit less lengthy. Let's just put it that way. Vigorous Steve here. Let's discuss how to stay in shape on holiday, or at least minimize body fat gain while we're away from home. Because let's be honest, nobody's going to get a six-pack while they're on holiday unless you make your holiday destination your new home and you locate a house with a kitchen close to a very good gym and a grocery store, and you basically switch locations and you continue with your bodybuilding or fitness journey. Then your holiday destination might be able to give you a better shape than you had previously. But for most of us, the guys that go away for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks in a row, it's about damage control and preventing body fat gain, setting us up for hours and hours and hours and hours of cardio when we get back and try to continue with their bodybuilding or fitness aspirations. So I understand that not everybody is in a position to go on holiday right now due to the situation. The borders are closed. And even here in Thailand, we're still under a partial lockdown. So I can't even travel or easily travel to some other provinces. You need a negative test or vaccine. So it's a little bit cumbersome, I understand. So maybe you won't be able to incorporate some of the things that I'll discuss in this video in the near future. But feel free to bookmark it for when that day comes where you can travel freely again. There might be something to say for a staycation in a 5-star hotel in your city of residence. Then you don't really have to go outside of the city that you live in. A very short trip from your home to the hotel. But considering that the tourism industry is so impacted due to the situation, a lot of 5-star hotels are 50% off, sometimes even 75%, at least here in Thailand. So that's what I've been doing with my wife recently. We pick a very nice 5-star hotel and we stay there for 2 or 3 days, and we incorporate some of the things that we'll discuss in this video so we don't have to do hours and hours and hours of cardio when we get back from our staycation. So if you're going on holiday in the near future, or bookmark this video for later, I would advise everybody to go on holiday in an overtrained state. So you want to be basically at the end of a training block where you've been grinding and grinding and grinding, and you feel a little bit of this neurological fatigue or stress. Maybe sleep is a little bit impaired, or you feel sleepy during the day. You're not really making progress anymore. In the last couple of gym sessions, if you're following progressive overload, you should be tracking your lifts, right? And you see that the logbook that everything is kind of stagnating. So you're coming up to a deload anyway. That's usually a good time to go on holiday. So while you're on holiday, you can relax and you don't have to go to the gym and try to force the hypertrophy on you, or at least be in an anti-catabolic state. When you're on holiday, you can kind of relax and just go to a local gym and pump the glycogen away and set yourself up for recovery during this period that you're away from your home gym, right? Where you're trying to make all the gains when you get back. So me and my wife always try to make sure that we're in an overtrained state before we go on holiday. And whether we go away for 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, at least during the period that we're away from home, we can rest, recover, deload, and then come back home extremely motivated because we've abstained from the gym during the duration that we were on a trip, right? So sometimes we see an awesome gym that we really like to train at, and then we basically go through the motions. We try all the machines that we don't have at the Muscle Factory here in Bangkok. Also a good recommendation for you. If you're going to a different gym in a different country or at your holiday destination, just do all the machines that you normally don't have access to. And then I usually do a workout where I deplete glycogen, so I don't get into an overly glycogen saturated state when I'm eating off the regular meal plan, right? That's part of the fun of going on a holiday. You go to another destination where food is aplenty, foods that you normally don't eat while you're following a strict bodybuilding or fitness diet. And it allows you to mentally relax a little bit as well, because me and my wife were always on diet from Monday to Saturday, Sunday afternoon. And then we eat a little bit more freely. But when we go on a holiday, and I'm sure it's the same for most of the other people out there, when you do go on a holiday, you kind of want to put the bodybuilding on the back burner and eat a little bit more freely and do the seafood diet, right? You walk around in the sightseeing area and you see a restaurant and you go eat there, right? A little bit more freedom, a little bit more relaxation. Now, we always make sure that we go on holiday in a glycogen depleted state. So we're overtrained and glycogen depleted, allowing for a little bit of a buffer for free eating, right? So your whatever additional carbohydrates you're eating are over your caloric maintenance that you established for yourself. At least your glycogen depleted, liver glycogen is gone, skeletal muscle glycogen is gone. And it will take you a couple days to really replenish those glycogen stores unless you really eat like an asshole at the hotel buffet. And then it goes quite rapidly. But what we'll discuss in this video is strategies like intermittent fasting and how to structure your diet a little bit according to a couple guidelines to prevent you from getting into glycogen supercompensation within the first 2 days. And now you are in a scenario where you have shin splints and terrible lower back pump. And that's what we're trying to avoid also. So before you go on holiday, make sure you're reasonably overtrained so you don't feel too guilty about missing a couple gym sessions while you're on holiday or not bringing the intensity to the gym while you're on holiday. And get into a glycogen depleted state. It usually takes about 2 weeks. You can follow a ketogenic diet before you go on holiday, or you simply reduce your carbs. It really depends on how much carbs you were eating previously. Then when you arrive at your holiday destination, what I do with my wife when we want to train, we do that in the morning, right? If you go to a hotel buffet, for example, if you got a nice package, you're staying in a resort or you're in a 5-star hotel, there's usually a breakfast buffet attached. Now, this is where a lot of self-control comes into play. Because hotel buffets can be quite luxurious with a million different food sources to try. What me and my wife do is we usually do intermittent fasting. So we skip breakfast until about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whenever we get at a destination for sightseeing and there's a nice restaurant with a nice scenery, right? So we get our workout out the door in the morning if you want to work out. And otherwise, sightseeing is cardio by itself. So walking around, going to see different sites, it gives you an opportunity to kind of burn away the carbohydrates that you've been eating the days before. Especially if you do a lunch and a dinner, then in a lot of cases, the dinner is a little bit more exorbitant, a little bit more carbohydrates, which should give you more than enough energy for a morning workout. And then what I usually do is just whatever machine I can find, high reps, get a good sweat going, no breakfast beforehand, and then just go about our business, take a shower, do sightseeing. And then when we really get hungry and we're in a little bit more glycogen depleted state, okay, then it's time for lunch. Just cookie cutter, intermittent fasting approach. You eat with a 8-hour eating window, for example. You get your workout in the morning, or you do your sightseeing cardio wherever you're going for that day. Now, if you do want to have a breakfast and you're in a position where you have a hotel buffet at your disposal, try not to get yourself into a state of food coma, right? And usually with the hotel buffet, there's so much bread and pastries and carbohydrates available that it's very, very easy to induce a food coma. Just try to avoid that. Perhaps do your workout or a little bit of fasted cardio first. Then you go to the hotel buffet and you pick your proteins and fats and some vegetables accordingly. That's your carbless breakfast. It shouldn't cause an insulin response. It shouldn't make you sleepy for the rest of the day. And then you do your sightseeing and get all of that out of the way until lunch. Usually after lunch, the meals are a little bit more voluminous and you start to get a little bit sleepy as well. And let's be honest, when you're on a holiday, you don't want to be sightseeing all the freaking time. You just want to see a couple sites, enjoy yourself, take a couple pictures. And then after lunch, you kind of relax and you go back to the resort or the hotel, maybe lay on the beach for a bit, read a book, right? Whatever you need to do to mentally unwind. So you get all that physical activity out the door in the morning, perhaps with a carbless breakfast, wherever you decide to eat. And then you get a little bit of activity going to prevent a glycogen buildup for the next consecutive few days that you're going to be on holiday. And then whenever you're finished with intermittent fasting and sightseeing and your eating window is coming up and you're ready for lunch, you can still make healthy food choices. Most of the sites that you're going to see, or you pack a lunch for yourself, Most of the sites will have healthy restaurants available, so you can get some sushi, reasonably healthy, or a gourmet hamburger and hold the fries and get a salad, or some mashed potatoes, or you get a steak with some mashed potatoes, for example. Or what I like to do, a sandwich, right? There's a lot of variety out there allowing you to still eat healthy. And then for dinner, you can, get away with perhaps a little bit larger food portion, because if you eat before bed, there's no moments later in the day where you tend to overeat. So if you start eating very, very early at the hotel buffet and you really pig out, well, lunch you're probably going to skip because you're sleeping during your food coma, and then the evening is maybe even a larger meal. So the overall caloric intake during the day is substantial, right? You want to avoid that. Follow intermittent fasting. The first meal that you have is reasonably portioned, reasonably healthy. And then maybe the last meal of the day is a little bit more adventurous, right? You have your dinner, whatever you have, maybe a pizza, etc. Right? There's so many options. I'm sure you're smart enough to figure out which food sources are a little bit more sustainable, which portions are a little bit more sustainable, so you don't come back home obese, or at least feeling obese. A lot of water retention, lower back pumps, that kind of stuff. So I always make sure that my lunch is something that's reasonably healthy, prepared fresh, and then later during the day, again, at a restaurant for dinner, it's also prepared fresh. I don't go into the grocery store and look for packaged foods that has a very long expiration date. Again, I go with healthy options, but the caloric intake is usually unregulated because somebody else is preparing the meals for me. And if I do want a couple side servings of interesting foods that are usually not at my disposal, yes, absolutely, I'll go for it, because that's what holiday is all about. Trying a couple new foods and relaxing a little bit in the process. Now let's discuss how to minimize fat gain with pharmacological options that we have at our disposal. Again, these are just options that you would run for short windows of time. I'm not telling you to run this the entire way through. This is something that I usually do for maybe a day or two when I know that I'm going to be eating a significant amount of calories, because all of these methods are not very sustainable. They will inhibit the absorption of micronutrients. They might alter your gut microbiome or the way you absorb calories, right? And you're still going to need some calories for activity during the day when you're going to the gym or sightseeing or whatever else you're doing. Maybe you're doing some other extreme sports, on your holiday destination. It's all good. So you don't want to overdo these supplements, but they do, from my experience, have their benefits to prevent fat gain, especially when you go on holiday for a couple of days and you're relaxing pretty hard. The first thing I usually consider when I go on holiday is a proton pump inhibitor, like Nexium, for example, which is osomeprazole or generic rabeprazole. Proton pump inhibitors inhibit the production of stomach acid. You would take those in a fasted state in the morning. So before you go to the hotel buffet or before you go to the gym or do some cardio, 20 to 40 milligrams, depending on the proton pump inhibitor, upon waking. So I would take 20 milligrams of Nexium, for example, which inhibits or reduces the amount of stomach acid that my body produces. So now digestion is not optimal anymore, right? Because you need stomach acid to optimize digestion, break down some of the foods that you're eating, and then help that with absorption later down in the intestinal tract. Now, Nexium or other proton pump inhibitors are very popular with bodybuilders during a contest prep or cutting phase, which I'm always against. I would always advise apple cider vinegar or betaine hydrochloride with pepsin, if that's found in a combination supplement, because you actually need high levels of stomach acidity to break down the foods that you're eating, to absorb the micronutrients, especially electrolytes and magnesium, for example. So when you look at the insert of Nexium or other proton pump inhibitors, with prolonged exposure, it inhibits the absorption of particular nutrients, right? And I think Nexium is particularly associated with magnesium and calcium deficiencies. So it's not something you want to run for prolonged periods of time, especially during a contest prep, where you need all these electrolytes and micronutrients in your diet because your calories are already restricted and you're burning through all these electrolytes with cardio and a lot of workout and posing practice and all that stuff. So I've never really been a fan of Nexium or a proton pump inhibitor for prolonged use during a contest prep or at any phase in time where you're bodybuilding and stomach acid and you get acid reflux issues because you're on oral steroids, or you're acidic due to high protein diets, right? I would always try to avoid that. But in case of a holiday, when you're going to eat off plan and you're only on holiday for a couple days, I feel that it's a practical application to reduce your stomach acid levels, inhibit some of the digestive processes that occur in the stomach. It will still, later on, you'll still digest a portion of the food that you're eating. So you're not going to not absorb anything from the meal that you're eating. You're just reducing the digestive process in the stomach by lowering the stomach acid levels. Now, if Nexium is not available to you, you're afraid for the micronutrient imbalance, then you can go with an apple cider vinegar, which is an acid. The acidic acid helps to absorb nutrients, but it also slows gastric emptying. So what I usually do during the off season, or basically most of the year, I have apple cider with each meal, which helps with digestion by increasing the stomach acid levels and also helps to prevent acid reflux. But it also increases insulin sensitivity by slowing gastric emptying. So it keeps the mouth of the stomach closed, allowing food to be digested. But because the stomach is now more acidic, the food that enters the intestinal tract through the liver into the bloodstream now does so at a reduced rate. So if you don't have access to Nexium, or you're afraid or unwilling to take this compound because it's associated with micronutrient deficiencies, you could actually increase your stomach acid with an apple cider vinegar and slow gastric emptying. Now, it really depends on your eating strategy during the holiday, which one is more beneficial. I usually eat quite poorly at certain points, so I would lean towards the Nexium or another proton pump inhibitor over the apple cider vinegar, considering that I take apple cider vinegar pretty much with each meal for the majority of the rest of the year. I usually only take Nexium on days where I expect to go to a restaurant with very high caloric food choices, in which case I don't want optimal digestion. I want to dispose some of these calories in the toilet the next day. So it's infrequent use of Nexium. I would not recommend anybody to take that on a daily basis, whether that's on holiday or during a contest prep or any other point in time where you expect acid reflux. But again, there is some practical application for it, and in my case, that will be on a holiday only. Another thing which I consider to have with meals is Garcinia Cambogia, which is an over-the-counter supplement that has been associated with weight loss or the reduction of visceral fat. Now, Garcinia Cambogia is a fruit extract that contains several isomers of hydroxycitric acids, and it's these hydroxycitric acids that inhibit an enzyme called citric acid lyase, which is otherwise required in the synthesis and digestion of dietary fatty acids. So when you take Garcinia Cambogia with a meal containing a decent amount of fat, it inhibits the breakdown and absorption of the fatty acids that are contained within this meal. So what I usually do is I estimate how much fat is contained within a meal, and then I would dose the Garcinia Cambogia accordingly. So they usually come in tablets of 500 milligrams. Let's say a meal containing 10 grams of fat, I would take 1,000 milligrams of Garcinia Cambogia. And a meal containing a decent amount of fat, like 50 grams of fat, for example, I would increase the dose to 5 grams Garcinia Cambogia, which is quite steep. I'm well aware of that. Again, this is not for prolonged use. This is for intermittent use when you're on holiday and trying to prevent fat gain. It's not 100% foolproof. You'll still absorb a little bit of fat. It's not going to inhibit all of these citric acid lyase enzymes, but it should inhibit more than sufficiently and prevent a little bit of absorption of this dietary fat that you're eating. Now, Garcinia Cambogia also contains a little bit of fiber, right? It's a bulky supplement. So whatever fat you're not absorbing is now contained within the Garcinia Cambogia, and whatever other fiber that you're consuming with that meal, then it's bound up, contains or remains within the intestinal tract. And then when you excrete that down the toilet the next day, obviously, a lot of those calories that you would otherwise be absorbing and have to take care with cardio are now disposed of. The problem with Garcinia Cambogia is that it's linked to increases in liver enzymes. And I've noticed that myself with prolonged use, even after a holiday when there's no drinking involved or nothing else that could increase liver enzymes. with frequent use of Garcinia Cambogia. So let's say you have 2 meals of 100 grams of, or 50 grams of fat per day, 100 grams of fat in total. And you take 2 servings of, or I take 2 servings of 5 grams Garcinia Cambogia with each of those 2 meals for lunch and for dinner. You do that for a couple of days in a row. Liver enzymes go up. And it's been shown in several studies that Garcinia Cambogia supplementation, especially a prolonged exposure, has a negative effect on liver enzyme concentrations in the bloodstream. So please keep that in mind. And again, by inhibiting the breakdown and synthesis of fatty acids from dietary fat sources, you're also inhibiting the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, like vitamin D3 or vitamin E, for example. So again, it's not for long-term use. You might be able to get away with a multivitamin that you take in the morning on an empty stomach, perhaps alongside the Nexium, to get at least a decent amount of micronutrients and fat-soluble vitamins in your system before Garcinia Cambogia is dosed later in the day with a lunch or a dinner. So at least you don't get into a terrible micronutrient deficient state because you already get some micronutrients from the multivitamin or vitamin D3 supplementation or fish oil or whatever you like to bring on your holiday. Again, it's for a short window of time that you can use these while you're on holiday and eating a little bit more freely, but it's certainly not for prolonged use. Now, sometimes there's something to say to have a little bit of Garcinia Cambogia with a cheat meal. Let's say you do one cheat meal on a Sunday. Okay, maybe a little bit of Garcinia Cambogia is in place to prevent the breakdown and absorption of fatty acids which are contained within that meal, lowering the requirement of additional cardio the following week. A medication that's actually being prescribed in cases of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or obesity or high amounts of visceral fat is a medication called Orlistat or Xenical, which offers something similar as over-the-counter Garcinia Cambogia supplementation. Xenical acts as a lipase inhibitor, so it inhibits lipase enzymes in the intestinal tract and prevent the breakdown of the dietary fatty acids that are being consumed. 120 milligrams before a meal is more than sufficient from my experience. It's a lot more potent when it comes to the inhibition of the absorption of dietary fats compared to Garcinia Cambogia. But I feel that a combination is certainly more beneficial than one or the other at a higher dose. So what I sometimes do, again, depending on the meal, if it really contains a lot of fat, or it's this trans fat, processed fat stuff that you shouldn't be eating, but you still somehow ate. 120 milligrams of Orlistat plus maybe 3,000 milligrams of Garcinia Cambogia with that particular meal that would be considered to be very, very unhealthy and very fatty. And then I always notice that a very large portion of the fat is not really absorbed from that meal. And I would take Orlistat and Garcinia Cambogia about 20 to 30 minutes before consuming a meal. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes I take it right before a meal. Sometimes right after a meal. I never really noticed the difference regarding the inhibition of this fat absorption. But on the packaging, it's usually recommended to take a little bit before meals, allowing the capsules to be digested and the content, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, so to say, to be available once that meal hits your stomach. Now, the problem with Garcinia Cambogia and Xenical or Orlistat is that it makes your stool incredibly oily, right? That's to be expected. You're eating meals with a decent amount of fat, and now you're actively inhibiting the breakdown of fat and the absorption of fat. Where's that fat going to go? Into the bathroom, obviously. Now, a little bit of a fair warning here. I'm going to go into the gruesome details, so feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps. Whenever I would inspect the toilet after the deed, there would be a layer of oil floating on top of whatever else was in the toilet bowl. So there's a very large amount of the fatty acids or the fat that is not being absorbed when incorporating the Garcinia Cambogia supplementation or the Orlistat medication. So yeah, a decent amount of wiping is involved as well. It can get messy. Yeah? Fair warning, just be ready for it. And again, if you're trying to do sightseeing actively in the morning, it might not be the best approach because you need to keep a toilet reasonably close. because you might be going to the bathroom quite frequently in the early hours of the day. So you might want to go to the gym first. Make sure you go to the gym with a clean toilet and some toilet paper. And then you can take care of all of this while you're going through your sets. I would not be wanting to found in some forest somewhere where you're sightseeing and then, well, you can use your imagination for that one. So what I found works well with the Garcinia Cambogia or the Orlistat one and the other or combination is fiber at the end of the day. And that fiber can come from fiber supplementation. Obviously, feel free to bring that with you. We'll discuss Senna Tea after this. So what I found works well for me is a combination of Senna Tea and fiber at the end of the day, just to help bind up whatever fat that I'm not absorbing and all the nutrients, right? The calories, the excess calories that I'm not absorbing because of the Nexium. I use a little bit of Senna Tea and fiber to kind of act like a plunger and just pull that all the way out. And so that it's not too messy the next day. I'm not frequently going to the bathroom multiple times in the early morning. What also works very well is just have some fruit before bed. Get some seasonal fruits on your favorite holiday destination. Fruit usually contains a decent amount of fiber. And having that at the end of the day after your dinner just helps with the cleaning out process. So whatever fiber of choice you want, maybe a salad, maybe a nice Caesar salad at the end of the day. Big one, lots of fiber. You help that all pass along, then your bathroom experience the next day is a little bit less cumbersome than without the fiber, or at least a little bit less lengthy. Let's just put it that way. While we're on the subject of evacuation, two other supplements I bring with me, or one supplement that I bring with me when I go on traveling, and that's the Senna Teas. Right, so Senna, you can find that in the form of tablets. I prefer the teas. I soak 1 or 2 tea bags depending on how much evacuation I'm going to need the next day, how much I ate. 1 or 2 tea bags in boiling water. Let that sit for 20, 30 minutes just until it's lukewarm, right? I let everything kind of assimilate into the water, and then I drink that before bed. Usually a couple hours later, I have to go to the bathroom and take care of that. So I don't have to go to the bathroom when I'm sightseeing or at the gym, right? So you help this process along. Senna contains senosides, which act as a mild laxative because they irritate the bowels and the stomach lining a little bit. They also tend to hold water, especially the Senna teas from my experience. They hold a little bit of a fluid in the intestinal tract because that fluid, the senosides that irritate and act as a laxative, that fluid is not being absorbed. So that stays in the intestinal tract. And then when you combine that with a fiber source, again, it allows everything to move through quite efficiently, I must say. Now, Senna or Senna Tea is actually FDA approved and available as an over-the-counter supplement. It's actually prescribed as a treatment for constipation and also to clear the bowels before a colonoscopy when a camera is inserted to see what's going on internally. That's the Senna Tea that helps with constipation and to help clear the bowels for medical treatments. So it should be readily available. It's not something that's difficultly sourced. It's available here in Thailand, and most of my clients all over the world are able to find Senna or the Senna tablet, Senna Tea, in their regular grocery store or pharmacy. So I would soak 2, sometimes 3 Senna Tea bags in boiling water for 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes if I forget. Let that all cool down. Mix maybe 15 grams of psyllium husk fiber. And then I would drink that before bed to allow evacuation the next day, or sometimes even in the middle of the night, depending on the dose and how much food I ate. And then I can go about my business, my sightseeing the next day, worry-free. Last thing that I sometimes employ, especially at very, very, very heavy cheat meals, and that's just a simple thing that I usually do every week anyway, and that's 500 milligrams Metformin before bed. So I would take the Metformin before the Senna Tea, give that maybe 20 to 30, maybe an hour to work and be absorbed to potentiate its effects. Again, everything that occurs after the Senna Tea with psyllium husk fiber is probably not as effective anymore. So I would take 500 milligrams, sometimes even 1,000 milligrams of Metformin extended release before bed, just to help with a little bit of a glucose disposal overnight, alter gastric emptying, alter the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream after it's been produced in the liver. Right, so it sets you a little bit up for a little bit better state of insulin sensitivity the next day. Perhaps dispose of a little bit of a glucose overnight. Again, disposing the glucose and disposing the fats sets you up for a case where less cardio is required when you get back from your holiday. And again, during that period, right, you're lowering your IGF-1 levels. Some people that's desired, some people that's not desired. So if that's not desired, I would only run the metformin for a couple of days where eating was really, really bad, a cheat meal level bad, right, that you would otherwise do once a week. And it's not something that I would employ every day of the holiday, unless I would looking into its anti-aging benefits. And then, yeah, I would be employing it year-round every day before bed anyway, right? While we're still on the subject, if Senna Tea is not sufficient and you really went to town for whatever reason, there's always stimulatory laxative like Dulcolax, for example. I can't for the life of me remember the dose that I used to run Dulcolax because it would always give me palpitation to the point I would think that I took clenbuterol. So there's some systemic effect of a Dulcolax that's absorbed and stimulates your heart rate. So I've always found that very, very uncomfortable. But I know people that prefer Dulcolax over Senna Tea because it's very effective, that's for sure. But there is a risk of Dulcolax is that some people get used to it. So they use Dulcolax for a couple of days in a row, or stimulatory laxatives, and then it no longer works. So I would prefer Senna Tea, which from my experience still works if you use it 5 days in a row, or 2 weeks in a row even. But with Dulcolax, there's some sort of tolerance. So I would not consider to run that multiple days in a row while you're on holiday. Maybe save that for emergencies only. Again, if you really outdid yourself. And then the other days, maybe consider a Senna Tea with a psyllium husk and perhaps a metformin a little bit earlier to slow gastric emptying and improve your insulin sensitivity the next day. And I think that pretty much covers it. So again, you can't out over-the-counter supplement or out medicine or out drug poor eating habits. If you really overdo it, days in, days out, multiple days, weeks in a row, you will get fat. There's no way around it unless you really carefully structure your diet with a little bit healthy food choices, not processed packaged stuff, right? You're going on holiday to enjoy yourself, to unwind, to relax. You can eat a little bit more freely, not the general bodybuilding or fitness food that you're used to. But really, even with all these supplements in place, you might still get fat gain because you're just simply eating too many calories or too much fat or too many carbs or, again, very poor food choices. So I hope this helps. Hope this sets you up for a little bit of information regarding damage control. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, vigoroussteve.com/shop. Looking for personalized advice? I'm always available for consultations. You can find the rates in the consultations section. Follow me on Instagram at VigorSteve. Vigorous crew. You guys know what to do. Intermittent fasting. A little workout in the morning. Then you go to the hotel buffet at 11 p.m. right before they close. You get your protein, your fats, and your healthy vegetables in. Then you go sightseeing. Then you eat a healthy what you want lunch and a healthy what you want dinner. You guys are awesome. Much appreciated. I'll see you guys in the next video.